40,000 subscribers. That's not something that we thought we'd say for a long time, and to have that in just over a year is incredible, so thanks so much to all of you. Our next goal really is to build up that Patreon enough that we can then potentially work much more on the channel. And already it's saved us a few times. If you're a long-term supporter of the channel, then consider joining our Patreon. You don't actually have to pay anything, you can just follow us on there. The links are all down below. This week's Buy, Avoid or Wait for a Sale has many of the game releases from the past month, and we've spent the time playing these, going over them on the Nintendo Switch, so that we can tell you whether or not you should purchase them, or indeed avoid them like the plague, or wait for a sale. Let's get into the video. The first game is called The Collection of Mana, which released about a month ago on the Switch. Now Glenn's been playing through these again, and he's a long-term fan of the series, and he thinks that this is a definite buy. The main reason for that is that they've now translated the game for the very first time into English, French and German. It really is the quintessential JRPG series, and one that inspired many of the JRPGs that people seem to love so much today. There is also multiplayer available for the Secret of Mana, that's 1 to 3 players, and Trials of Mana has a 1 or 2 player co-op mode. While the full pack is quite pricey, if you are a fan of this genre, or indeed of the series in general, then we'd say pick it up. If not, then wait for a sale. Pioneer Mars. Now, what put most people off with this one is that it's sponsored by JCB, and I think when you see this level of advertising in a game, it can just make you feel very wary of it indeed. Something about it enticed me. I must admit, I'm a bit of a space nerd in general, and the idea of a simulation on Mars where you have to set up your own base, go scavenging for resources, and then upgrade your suit and gear was quite interesting. But I waited for a very deep sale, and I think I picked this one up at about 80% off in the recent summer sale, and I have to say it's actually quite good. But you start the game with a very in-depth tutorial. You can look at an overworld map of Mars, which is huge, set waypoints and go and dig up various resources, which you can then bring back and build up your base. You can improve several areas of your spacesuit, such as its survivability, as well as other things. There are tons of different building and structures to enjoy, and a load of unique vehicles that handle really well with physics-based properties. The whole thing runs on the Unreal Engine, so it looks tasty enough, but I expect a touch of blur in handheld. For me though, I would say that this is actually a pickup on a sale, just as I've done. You might be surprised. A quite good game. The next game is called Legrand Legacy. Now this was released a few months ago, and I played through almost the entire game for a review, and then hit a game-breaking bug that essentially took me back to square one, and I just didn't have time to get it out. Now I really enjoyed this game. It's most similar to perhaps Final Fantasy VIII, both in terms of the visuals as well as the overall gameplay mechanics. There are some nice additions, such as a time gate based fighting system whereby you have to use your own timing to improve the power of your hits. It's a nice game and I really enjoyed it, but like I say, back in the day it had a bug that they've now patched out. For me, I'd say pick this one up on a sale. The next title, and one of my favourite genres, is the point-and-click adventure Secret Files 2. Now yes, it is a decade old, with some very, very strange puzzles indeed in there, but it's filling a void, and that void being the lack of any broken sword games on the Nintendo Switch right now. It's good enough and it's enjoyable. The visuals aren't going to set the world on fire, but I still did enjoy playing one of these classic old school adventures. And if you're a fan of games like Siberia or Siberia 2, then you're going to know what to expect. For me, this would be pick up on quite a deep sale, maybe a 50% or more. The next game is called Lust for Darkness. Now, I thought about reviewing this one, but unfortunately, I don't think the channel would have survived it in terms of the flags that would have gone up, because there is more penetration in this game than something that penetrates things. It is most certainly not intended for children. It's an adventure game where you take on the role of a character whose wife has gone missing. You soon discover that your wife, in fact, has been taken hostage by a strange sex-based cult. And that's pretty much where my aspirations of reviewing this one ended, and also my enjoyment. It is riddled with performance issues, and while some of the areas run nicely, the rest were a bit of a mess. The overall game is quite awkward with the way it delivers its more adult content, and the end story is just incredibly lackluster. For me, this would be a definite avoid. The game Etherborn comes to us from developer Altered Matter Games and is inspired by one of my favourite mobile games of all time, Monument Valley. If you ever played that, then it was more of an isometric game where you could rotate the world as your character travelled up vertical surfaces and down the other side, and you eventually try to reach the end goal. Now here, they've taken that idea and placed it within a 3D world, each of which are accessible from a beginning hub area, which is a giant tree. While I found the learning curve a little bit steep with this one, it literally flings you into it and then hopes that you figure everything out. Some of the puzzles were quite tricky early on, and then they kind of level out. Overall, I enjoyed this immensely, although it never quite hit those Monument Valley highs. It tries to be everything that that game was, but some of the more obscure dialogue, it just felt a touch contrived for me. The main standout here is that wonderful puzzle platforming, and while the game isn't overly long, it's one that I would recommend buying because the initial price is actually quite low, the custom soundtrack is fantastic, and like I say, that puzzling is just so well done. As you walk up walls, and then the gravity shifting mechanic sends the whole world upside down, and your brain has to adapt to that new layout, and I enjoyed it a lot. For me, this would be a pickup.
The direction of the sky. Challenge the very laws of physics. Create paths where there was none before. Embrace the need to go where others did not.
Paradox Soul is quite a surprising little game. It's very cheap, yes, it's pixel art, and it's from, and I'm going to struggle to say this, Ratalaika Games. They've sent us so many codes over the last few months, it's very rare that we actually get to cover one. I thought I'd give this a go. Now, I played a small amount of it. It had a bit of a flashback come another world vibe to it, but after I got to grips with some of the mechanics, especially the cover shooting, began to enjoy it. It is a Metroidvania, it is a survival game, but the real thing I liked about this were some of the boss fights when I eventually got to one, and some of the abilities you'll unlock add a lot to the experience. Look, it's not going to set the world on fire. Yes, it looks like so many of the games we've seen before, but it's quite a charmer, this one. And at the moment it's £4.99, and for me, that would be a pickup. If that's a sale price, then, you know, go for it on sale. The This next title is not going to need a huge amount of introduction. It is Lego Ninjago, which Glenn has recently played through, and here are his thoughts. Based on the Ninjago movie, which I took my daughter to the cinema to see and we both thoroughly enjoyed, the game captures the humour of the film very well. It has a host of special moves to learn and that classic Lego gameplay as well as local co-op. If you're a Ninjago fan or just like Lego games, then seek out the physical version, which goes for around £15 or £20 and is a definite buy at that price. At the current eShop price though, I'd have to say wait for about a 50 or 60% sale, as it's just way too high at the moment.
Does anyone have a plan for this?
Oh, we should huddle. Huddles are great for plans.
Ninjago!
The next title is one I've been playing through with my two kids, and it's called Quest Hunters. This is an action RPG from a top-down view, and it has a survival mechanic to it as well. It's an okay game, but if you have young children and you can find it on sale, then I can promise you my kids absolutely loved it, and as an introduction to an action RPG, it's worked really nicely for them. I think I just need to say the name of the next game and you're going to know what I'm going to say. The next game is called Bus Fix and is a port of a... oh dear, look at it. Just look at it. Just look at it. Should we all just say it together? You should avoid this game. You should avoid it like the absolute plague. It is unbelievably bad. You're given the derpiest looking bus, which it doesn't even call a bus in the game. It calls it a car, so they've obviously just stripped out another rubbish game and just put the title bus on top and then got one of their little friends, brothers, mates to render a bus and then stick it into the game. It's awful. Avoid it like the plague. I was really looking forward to the next title. It's called Zombie Driver. It puts you in a top-down, almost old-school GTA style game where you have to do missions such as rescuing people from hordes of zombies or saving them from their houses. Now the main issue with this game is just, it's quite boring. You wouldn't think so, would you? But controlling your car, you just feel limited by it rather than helped by it. And while you can shoot and then fire flames out the back of your car, overall, the world felt lifeless and empty, and there were some very strange mechanics, such as clearing an area of zombies before you can actually collect your hostage, but unfortunately, in the time that you'd sit waiting for the collection timer to count down, more would spawn in, and you'd have to go and repeat this over and over again. That could happen several times and was just annoying. For me, Zombie Driver is, as it stands, an avoid unless you find it at maybe about an 80 or 90% off. This next title is from Sega and it's called Rock of Ages. Now, when we saw this, we thought it looked very, very strange. And we played it the other day and it's really quite strange. Think Monty Python meets a boulder and you get a good idea of what this game entails, but then you'd still have no clue. It's a mixture of a strategy and an action game, whereby you plan out how to attack an opponent, which takes place over a symmetrical course. They're on one end, you're on the other, and you have to break down their door using your boulder. Now, during each stage, you have a period of time in which you can lay defenses and traps. This was in itself quite challenging, because the boulder has such momentum that you have to gradually slow it down. So putting one area filled with all your best traps, not a good idea. They'll just smash straight through it, knock your castle door down, and end up winning the round. As I got into the game and unlocked new perks and upgrades, I found that it was actually quite strategic. And then when you combine this with the action that you get every time that your boulder's ready to deploy, it's a very strangely compelling title, and I quite enjoy it. I would say this one would be a wait for a sale. Now, the Tiny Metal series are good games, they're known to be good games, and with Full Metal Rumble, it's essentially a bigger and better version of the previous title. It has some stiff competition that wasn't there before. If you look at a game like Wargroove, then that makes your buying choice a little more tricky. What I will say is that it offers 77 skirmish maps, 21 of which are available for multiplayer combat, with an expanded army of more than 21 different unit types, additional heroes and commander units, but the real kicker for me are that there are 39 campaign missions to play across, and some of these are quite lengthy and technical, and I do enjoy them. If you've maybe finished Wargroove, and you're looking for another game of a very similar style to that and the more obvious comparisons, then I would say this is quite an enjoyable one to consider. It is currently at 15% off on sale at £10.70, and for that price, you can't go too far wrong. This would be a pickup, maybe now.
On the battlefield, combine your unit's attacks for greater firepower. Displace enemies with assaults to conquer new ground. Turn the tides of battle with devastating commander powers. Challenge other commanders across 88 battlefields in multiplayer and wage tactical warfare with over 20 types of units. The Tiny Metal saga continues on Nintendo Switch and PC.
A big title here, and it's Dragon's Quest Builders 2, which was released a few weeks back on the Nintendo Switch. I never got to play the first title, but I am a huge Minecraft fan, and I didn't really know how they were going to combine an RPG with the Minecraft freedom of building wherever you want to build, but I was so pleasantly surprised. This feels much more like a fully fledged RPG. Do you know what? It actually reminded me of the game Ys 8, Lacrimosa of Dana, which was a game that Glenn recommended to me, and has a very similar premise. You're shipwrecked on an island, and there you go looking for other people and then building up. But in this game, each little town, although customizable, has the handcrafted feeling that you lose in so many of these types of games. Add in an overarching story that's quite strong, and the ability to play co-op with a large group of friends. The only downside to this title is that very steep asking price. I would say if you can't afford it at the moment but want it, then it's one to add to your wish list because it's hugely enjoyable. Performance is good for the most part. There are the occasional slowdowns, particularly when you zoom out with the camera, but the overall mechanics are very solid indeed, and it takes a sandbox game and turns it into a purposeful RPG like no other that I've played. Very good indeed. For me though, at this price, pick it up on a sale. Back onto the point and click genre, we have Nelly Cootalot, the Fowl Fleet. Very strange name that. Now, I played through the entirety of this one about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. I absolutely love my point and click games, but the thing that they struggle with the most, other than making coherent puzzles, is making a game that has a character that you want to engage with, that you want to play as, and they have done a brilliant job here. Nelly herself is quite witty. There are references to games of old, particularly the Monkey Island titles, but there's a little bit of Discworld in here as well. It's just quite a quirky title. Now, the voice acting of some of the characters is brilliant. The voice acting cast are comedians from some of the biggest films and TV series in the world, such as Doctor Who, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and the Broken Sword 5 games. Everything's fully voice acted, and while the puzzles sometimes suffer from the obscurity that we see, most of them are quite logical. But it's those 45 unique characters and the 35 lovely locations that made this stand out for me. I was really impressed. And while the game is a touch steep at £17.99, I know it's been on other platforms, it's probably much cheaper, I would still say you want to pick this one up on a sale.
The dinghy!
What dinghy?
The last title on this rather monumentally long list is The Mystery of Woodley Mountain. Of course I was interested in this one. It's a point and click and it's self-proclaimed to be inspired by the greats. Unfortunately for me, the characters, unlike the previous title I've just mentioned, just weren't engaging enough. And although the quite unique art style is interesting, it just doesn't come together to create greatness all of its own. Now, having said that, the story is good enough. It just never reaches the lofty ambitions that it sets itself. I would say pick this up on quite a deep sale.
And a cast of peculiar characters. humans.
I am Julio. Hey, shut it, will you?
Make it quick, dear boy.
Hi. How you doing, little dude?
Who are those bugs?
Can you save the children? The Mystery of Woolly Mountain, Spring 2019.
So there we have it. That is a massive buy, avoid or wait for a sale list, and there's not too many there to avoid, to be honest. They're mainly quite good games, and that came off the back of one of your recommendations. A massive thanks to all of our patrons who support the channel every single month. It makes a huge difference to what we're able to do, and your support means the world to us. Be sure to check out our Discord if you haven't done so already. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!